In a historic and defiant move, the Jamaican government has officially launched a legal challenge against the United States' controversial 2025 travel restrictions. This isn't just a diplomatic complaint, it's an unprecedented lawsuit filed with international trade and human rights tribunals, arguing the policies are discriminatory and violate bilateral agreements. The Jamaican case hinges on two powerful arguments, each rooted in a deep sense of justice and a desire to challenge what many see as long-standing inequities in international policy. At the heart of the matter is a growing frustration among Caribbean nations, particularly Jamaica, regarding the way U.S. immigration and travel restrictions have been applied to their citizens. These policies, they argue, are not only unfair but also perpetuate harmful stereotypes and create unnecessary barriers for ordinary people seeking opportunity, family reunification, or simply the chance to travel freely. The case has become a rallying point for advocates of fair treatment and equal rights, both within Jamaica and across the wider Caribbean region. The first argument centers on the use of data, meticulously gathered, analyzed, and presented by Jamaican legal teams and policy experts. They have compiled extensive evidence to demonstrate that the U.S. restrictions disproportionately affect Caribbean nations, especially Jamaica, under the stated rationale of national security. However, the data tells a different story. According to official U.S. government statistics, Jamaican travelers have consistently lower visa overstay rates than many other countries whose citizens are not subject to the same level of scrutiny or outright bans. For example, in the most recent fiscal year, the overstay rate for Jamaican visitors was significantly below that of several European and Asian countries, yet those countries face far fewer restrictions. This discrepancy, the Jamaican side argues, reveals a troubling inconsistency in how U.S. policies are applied. The legal team has gone further, breaking down the numbers by year, visa category, and even by port of entry. Their analysis shows that despite a few high-profile incidents that have been widely reported in the media, the vast majority of Jamaican travelers comply with U.S. immigration laws. In fact, the data suggests that the perception of Jamaicans as high-risk travelers is not supported by the facts. Instead, it appears that the restrictions are based on outdated assumptions and a lack of nuanced understanding of the Caribbean region. The Jamaican government has also pointed to the economic and social costs of these policies, noting that families are separated, business opportunities are lost, and cultural exchanges are stifled as a result of what they see as an unjust system. To bolster their case, Jamaican officials have enlisted the support of independent researchers and international organizations. These experts have reviewed the data and concluded that there is no objective basis for singling out Jamaica or other Caribbean nations for harsher treatment. In public hearings and written submissions, they have highlighted the positive contributions of Caribbean immigrants to U.S. society, as well as the strong historical ties between the two regions. The message is clear: the current policies are not only unfair, but they also undermine the spirit of partnership and mutual respect that should define U.S.-Caribbean relations. The second argument is perhaps even more profound, touching on fundamental principles of human rights and international law. Jamaican advocates claim that the U.S. restrictions amount to racial and geographic profiling, a practice that is explicitly prohibited by numerous international treaties and conventions. They point to the fact that, while the stated goal of the policies is to enhance security, the practical effect has been to single out people from certain countries, primarily those with predominantly black or brown populations, for harsher treatment. This, they argue, is a clear violation of international anti-discrimination statutes, including the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, to which both the U.S. and Jamaica are signatories. In their legal filings, Jamaican lawyers have cited specific cases in which travelers from the Caribbean have been subjected to invasive questioning, prolonged detentions, and even summary deportations, often with little or no explanation. These experiences, they say, are not isolated incidents but part of a broader pattern of discriminatory enforcement. The psychological impact on affected individuals and communities is profound, leading to feelings of humiliation, alienation, and mistrust. Moreover, the policies send a damaging message to the world about whose rights and dignity are valued and whose are not. International human rights organizations have weighed in as well, submitting amicus briefs and public statements in support of the Jamaican position. They argue that the U.S., as a global leader and advocate for democracy, has a special responsibility to ensure that its policies are consistent with the principles it espouses on the world stage. The use of racial or geographic criteria in immigration decisions, they contend, not only violates international law, but also undermines the credibility of the U.S. as a champion of human rights. The Jamaican case has sparked a broader conversation about the role of race and geography in shaping global migration policies. Activists and scholars have pointed out that similar patterns can be seen in other parts of the world, where people from certain regions face higher barriers to mobility simply because of their nationality or the color of their skin. The hope is that, by challenging these practices in a high-profile case, Jamaica can set a precedent that will inspire other countries to examine and reform their own policies. As the case moves forward, the stakes are high, not just for Jamaica, but for all countries and communities that have been affected by discriminatory travel and immigration policies. The outcome will be closely watched by governments, advocacy groups, and ordinary people around the world. For many, it represents a test of whether the international community is willing to stand up for the principles of fairness, equality, and respect for human dignity. In the end, the arguments against U.S. policies are about more than just numbers or legal technicalities. They are about the kind of world we want to live in, a world where people are judged by their actions, not by where they come from, where laws are applied consistently and fairly, and where the bonds of friendship and cooperation between nations are strengthened, not undermined, by the policies we choose to adopt. Second, and more critically, Jamaica is arguing that the new public charge rules, along with recent increases in visa fees, represent not just a bureaucratic hurdle, but a significant and targeted threat to the economic stability of the Caribbean region. The Jamaican government, in its official statements and legal filings, has emphasized that these policy changes are not isolated administrative decisions, but rather part of a broader pattern of actions that disproportionately impact small, tourism-dependent economies like Jamaica's. According to Jamaican officials, the new rules and fee hikes are being implemented at a time when the country is still recovering from the devastating effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, which brought the tourism industry, Jamaica's economic lifeblood, to a near standstill for over a year. The timing, they argue, could not be worse, and the consequences could be dire for thousands of Jamaican families who rely on seasonal work opportunities in the United States to support themselves and their communities back home. Jamaica's legal team has pointed out that the public charge rules, which make it more difficult for foreign workers to obtain visas if they are deemed likely to rely on public assistance, are particularly damaging for Caribbean workers. Many of these workers travel to the U.S. for temporary, seasonal jobs in hospitality, agriculture, and other service sectors, jobs that are often low wage but provide critical income that is sent back to Jamaica in the form of remittances. These remittances are a vital source of foreign exchange for the Jamaican economy, helping to pay for imports, stabilize the currency, and fund essential public services. By making it harder for Jamaicans to obtain work visas, the new rules threaten to cut off this crucial economic lifeline, with ripple effects that could be felt across the entire Caribbean region. The impact of these policies is already being felt on the ground. Across Jamaica, once bustling beach resorts now sit eerily quiet, with many hotels forced to close their doors or operate at a fraction of their former capacity. The tourism sector, which directly and indirectly supports nearly 1 in 4 Jamaican jobs, has been hit especially hard. Workers who once counted on seasonal employment in the United States, whether as hotel staff, restaurant workers, or agricultural laborers, now find themselves waiting in limbo, uncertain if they will be able to travel abroad for work this year or ever again. For many, the loss of these opportunities means not just a temporary setback, but the potential for long-term financial hardship. Families that once relied on remittances to pay for school fees, medical bills, and daily necessities are now struggling to make ends meet, and small businesses that depend on the spending power of returning workers are facing closure. The Jamaican government has collected testimony from affected workers, business owners, and community leaders, painting a vivid picture of the human cost of these policy changes. One hotel manager in Montego Bay described how his staff has been reduced by more than half, with many former employees now unable to find work either at home or abroad. A mother of 3 in St. Anne recounted how her family's only source of income, her husband's seasonal job in Florida, has dried up, forcing them to rely on food banks and charity for the first time in their lives. These stories, officials argue, are not isolated incidents, but part of a broader pattern of economic disruption that threatens to undermine Jamaica's hard-won progress in reducing poverty and promoting sustainable development. The process of traveling to the United States for seasonal work has always been a complex and sometimes stressful undertaking for Jamaican workers. Each year, thousands of Jamaicans line up at airports, clutching their suitcases and travel documents, hoping for the chance to earn a living abroad. For many, the journey is a rite of passage, a way to support their families, gain valuable experience, and build a better future. But with the new public charge rules and increased visa fees, the barriers to entry have become almost insurmountable for many would-be workers. The cost of applying for a visa has risen sharply, putting it out of reach for low-income applicants, while the stricter eligibility requirements mean that even those who can afford to apply face a much higher risk of being denied. At the same time, U.S. Customs and immigration officials have stepped up their scrutiny of Caribbean travelers, subjecting them to longer wait times, more invasive questioning, and additional documentation requirements. Many Jamaican workers report feeling singled out and unfairly targeted, with some being turned away at the border despite having valid visas and job offers. The uncertainty and anxiety surrounding the process have led some to abandon their plans altogether, further reducing the pool of available workers for U.S. employers who depend on seasonal labor from the Caribbean. In response to these developments, Jamaica has taken the unprecedented step of framing the new U.S. policies as an illegal economic attack under international trade law. The government has filed formal complaints with the World Trade Organization and other international bodies, arguing that the public charge rules and visa fee hikes constitute a form of economic discrimination that violates the principles of fair trade and equal treatment. According to Jamaica's legal team, the U.S. is using its immigration system as a tool to create artificial barriers to labor mobility, effectively weaponizing visa policy to protect domestic industries at the expense of foreign workers and their home countries. Jamaican officials have pointed to provisions in various international agreements, including the General Agreement on Trade and Services, JATS, and the Caribbean Basin Initiative, that are designed to promote the free movement of labor and prevent discriminatory practices. By making it harder for Caribbean workers to access the U.S. labor market, they argue, the new rules undermine these agreements and set a dangerous precedent for other countries to follow. The case has attracted widespread attention from legal scholars, human rights advocates, and policymakers across the Caribbean and beyond, many of whom see it as a test case for the future of international labor mobility in an increasingly protectionist world. The economic consequences of these policies are already being felt in communities across Jamaica. In bustling marketplaces that once thrived on the spending power of returning seasonal workers, vendors now report declining sales and shrinking profits. Small businesses, from corner shops to taxi services, are struggling to stay afloat as their customer base dwindles. Economic data shows a worrying trend. Remittances from the U.S., which once accounted for a significant share of Jamaica's GDP, have begun to decline, putting additional pressure on the country's balance of payments and threatening the stability of the Jamaican dollar. The government is warned that if the current policies remain in place, the long-term effects could be devastating, not just for Jamaica, but for the entire Caribbean region. Reduced access to seasonal work in the U.S. could lead to higher unemployment, increased poverty, and greater social instability, with knock-on effects for education, health, and public safety. At the same time, U.S. employers who rely on Caribbean workers for critical seasonal jobs may find themselves facing labor shortages, higher costs, and reduced competitiveness in the global marketplace. In sum, Jamaica's legal and economic claims against the new U.S. public charge rules and visa fee hikes are rooted in a deep concern for the future of the country's economy and its people. The government is calling on the international community to recognize the disproportionate impact of these policies on small, vulnerable economies, and to take action to ensure that the principles of fairness, equity, and mutual benefit remain at the heart of the global trading system. As the legal battle unfolds, the eyes of the Caribbean, and indeed the world, will be watching closely to see whether justice and economic opportunity will prevail. In the heart of Kingston, a bold legal war is unfolding, one that is sending ripples far beyond the shores of Jamaica. The stately government buildings, the historic courthouse, and the ever-present Jamaican flag waving in the tropical breeze all stand as silent witnesses to a momentous chapter in the nation's history. Here, in these halls of power, a team of determined legal minds has come together, united by a single purpose: to challenge the might of Washington and to assert the rights of small nations on the global stage. This is not just a legal battle. It is a declaration of sovereignty, a demand for respect, and a call for justice that echoes through every corridor of power in Jamaica. The message is clear and unmistakable, a direct challenge to the policymakers in Washington, D.C. As the sun rises over the Capitol dome and the American flag flutters above the White House, the world watches closely. In the marble halls of Congress and the stately rooms of the White House, diplomats and lawmakers are forced to reckon with a new reality. The era of unchecked, unilateral decision-making is being called into question. The legal action launched by Jamaica is not just a local dispute. It is a signal to the United States government that its actions have consequences, and that the voices of smaller nations can no longer be ignored or dismissed. The diplomatic meeting rooms in Washington are abuzz with urgent conversations as officials scramble to assess the implications of this unprecedented move. At the heart of this legal confrontation lies the issue of immigration, a subject that touches the lives of millions and stirs deep emotions on both sides of the border. For too long, small nations like Jamaica have been subject to sweeping immigration decrees issued by powerful countries, often without consultation or consideration for the unique challenges faced by their citizens. The crowded airport terminals, the long lines at immigration checkpoints, and the sight of Jamaican and U.S. passports side by side all tell a story of families separated, dreams deferred, and opportunities lost. But now Jamaica is standing up and saying, enough. No longer will small nations accept unilateral immigration decrees without a fight. This legal battle is about more than just policy. It is about dignity, fairness, and the right of every nation, no matter its size, to have a say in decisions that affect its people. The outcome of this case could have far-reaching consequences, not just for Jamaica and the United States, but for the entire international community. In the grand chambers of international courts, judges deliberate and delegates from around the world gather to discuss the implications of this landmark case. The stakes are high. A victory for Jamaica could set a powerful precedent, empowering other small nations to challenge the status quo and demand a seat at the table. The diplomatic power dynamics that have shaped global relations for decades are now being tested, and the world is watching to see what comes next. As legal teams present their arguments and international observers take note, one thing is certain: the fight for justice, equality, and respect among nations is far from over. The reverberations of this bold legal war will be felt for years to come, reshaping the way countries interact and negotiate on the world stage. To get the clearest, most timely updates on this high-stakes international clash, you need to stay informed. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our crucial breakdowns.